You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, we're back with episode 17 of Cards to the Moon. I'm Clark, and with me, co-hosting as always, is Hyung and John. Now, right off the top, I just wanted to bring up our recent case break of 2021 Topps Chrome Baseball, which we did with some of our hobby friends. That was a fun night, right?
Absolutely. Always a good time ripping, Clark.
Yeah. Like, what is it with Topps Chrome that makes it a fun box to rip? Like, we did it the first time when we got together as a group, when we realized that we weren't the only ones that were really enjoying the resurgence of the hobby. And I remember last time was great because I hit that SP variation
Luis Robert.
part of Luis Robert, which was amazing. Nice. But yeah, Topps Chrome is always fun, right?
Yeah, no, Topps Chrome, me and John always talk about it. Like, I've personally ripped a lot of paper in the past, and it's very boring. It's a boring rip. I think even like parallels are different. Paper parallels versus like chrome parallels. I think a lot of people really like the colors, the sparkle. Yeah. So, and it's less cards, right? So you're usually, opening packs, and there's less cards in packs. It's not like a lot of base cards, right? So yeah, no, we always enjoy ripping Topps Chrome because it's kind of like that flagship OG, kind of like that's gonna be the sought after kind of set in that year, right? So I personally like Topps Chrome more than paper. It's a more fun rip for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when you just look at the cards, right? Like you feel them in hand. When you get used to ripping paper and then you move to Topps Chrome, you can just see how much more premium it is. The look, the feel, everything about it just feels so much better. So I think that has a bit to do with the fun in it. And I think exactly what Hyung said, like chasing the color, all of the flagship rookies, like in Chrome version, I think there's a lot to pick out. Not necessarily like investor or value wise, but just to have fun, to pick out some names that you're pulling out of a box. Like, yeah, it's right.
I think autos too. Autos, because papers really don't have autos, right?
That's true.
Like rookie autos. So Topps Chrome is kind of like that rookie auto chase well for a lot of people. So I think the autos play a big factor, and they bait you so bad because they'll put like 90% pitchers in, thinking you're like, I'm feeling good, I'm gonna hit a position player, some big prospect, and it's another base pitcher, right? So
yeah.
Oh, well, we knew going into that break. I think Johnny, you mentioned you read somewhere that it was like 70% of the auto hits were pitchers in 2021
That's what I
Topps
heard.
Chrome.
Yeah.
So we went into it knowing that, and I think it kind of played itself out. Like a lot of us did end up getting a pitcher auto. Right?
Yeah.
But what did you guys hit again? I know I
actually, I look back and I think I hit a pretty decent card looking back, because it was an orange auto and of Luis Patino. Yeah. Like for me, it's like that's out of 25, and Patino's a young stud, but obviously it was overshadowed by the big hit, so it was we all wanted like the position players, but my hit wasn't too bad. I'm not complaining. It was an orange auto, so usually
that was a good one for sure. A colored auto is nothing to laugh at.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
I guess my best one was Rafael Devers. You guys know how much I love my boy Rafael Devers.
Follows you around.
Yeah, insert auto. So that was a cool hit for me. And I can't even remember the second one. It was a positional player, but it's one of the Diamondbacks. Yeah. That's how much it's valued.
Unfortunately, I don't think I got anything noteworthy. But I did get one positional, so I beat the odds of not getting a relief pitcher auto.
Well, the big hit of the night, we all agree. Shout out to Will, who guest hosted this pod.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think must have brought him luck, right?
Absolutely.
But he pulled a monster Mike Trout on-card autograph.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah.
See that's what makes it fun. Just being able to witness it. Like one person goes home.
For sure.
Obviously we overpaid for the boxes at the end of the day in terms of ROI, but like it's not necessarily, you know, all about that return, you know, that day, right? You're kind of,
Right, yeah.
you know, doing it as a hobby. I think it was a Friday night for us, right? Because that's the only time we could really get together with a lot of the guys. But yeah, it's just kind of like the feel, and it was awesome. It was like we were fist pumping. It was
the energy was great, man.
Yeah, it was a monster pull. Yeah,
what
anytime
we
you
wanted
hit
to
like a
see.
trout auto, that's the grail, right?
Yeah.
I was saying I've never held a trout auto
Yeah,
card
there you
in my
go.
hands
Me
until
neither.
that day. It was such an honor.
It was awesome.
But
Yeah, it was number
yeah,
two,
it's
right?
always fun.
Number to
Yeah, I
99
think
out
so.
of 99.
Yeah, it's a pretty big, nice
Yeah.
hit.
There you go. Always fun breaking with the boys. And I think we said we'll try to make this a tradition. Even if we just break one, it's got to be Topps Chrome Baseball year after year.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, let's move on then to hobby headlines. This week, I wanted to touch upon the issue of crossover grading. So, for example, there are some collectors who will try to cross over their BGS or Beckett Graded Service graded cards to a PSA graded one, or vice versa. We bring this up because, John, you brought it to our attention. The recent news that the LeBron Exquisite Rookie Auto card had crossed over from a BGS 9.5 grading to a PSA 1010, which is crazy, right? But we'll get into that and what we think of that news. But before we do, maybe for the newer collectors, we can start by explaining why a collector would cross over from BGS to PSA or vice versa. What's the strategy that you would take in either of those cases?
I think the most popular, I guess, strategy that people see is they try to, you know, get that PSA 10 through like a BGS, like a 9.5, right? And
Right.
I think subgrades play a huge role. Obviously, people look at subgrades, and personally, I would never even like consider it. Obviously, crossovers are a little different now than they were before because, you know, the cost. I don't know if they even do crossovers right now, but the cost is way different, right? But for me, the rule was I'm not going to submit anything essentially with a subgrade below like a 9.5 on a BGS. But with that said, I've seen, you know, some, you know, 9 sub centerings that look perfectly fine that other people might kind of like take that risk. But I find like if you try crossing over directly, just think of it from a standpoint. PSA gets a BGS sub, and you're trying to get a PSA 10 in their, you know, in their slab, and they look at a 9 subgrade from a different company.
Yeah.
Like, to me, how logistically possible is it for them to just say, you know what, I'll give a PSA 10? Like,
Right.
I always thought that way. I personally submitted, you know, probably 3 or 4 different cards, and I've had one successful crossover. Where I've had
From a
Sorry.
BGS 9.5 to a PSA 10?
correct, which was
Wow.
a Tatis Sapphire. It was a Tatis Sapphire 9.5 that I bought for $800 a while back, and it had 9.5 subgrades, and it ended up PSA 10ing, which increased the value at that time. I think PSA 10s were going for about $3,500, right? So I also sent a Gatorade. That Soto Gatorade paper that had a 10 subgrade that were 9.5 all the way around that didn't cross, right?
Right.
On that same submission, right? So, and I find that it's like literally like less than 33% chance, and I believe that that's part of the reason. It's when it's all subjective, when it's done by human, you know, grading, like anything could kind of happen, and that's why I say like they look at it from a BGS 9.5 slab. I wouldn't get my hopes up, essentially, right? I think the better move if you're into that kind of stuff is actually cracking it and resubmitting it if you think that grade you know, deserves better. But at that point, you know, you're gambling, right? But I do find a lot of value, like I said, with that Tatis that I did. You know, it increased value by probably, you know, $2,500, right, at the end of the day. So there is its place, I think, and you could do the other way. I find like PSA sometimes, you know, undergrades a card. I sometimes believe like PSA 9 values are way cheap, and they're better than a PSA 9 or a BGS 9, for instance. So that's when I'll try going the opposite way, going from a PSA 9 to kind of like a BGS 9.5, because, you kind of say, okay, if it's not a 10, will it get potentially 10 subgrades with maybe a couple 9.5s, right? And that's where you get, your 9.5 BGSs, right? So, for example, I took a PSA 9 Pete Alonso Sapphire. I thought it was a PSA 10. It ended up coming back a PSA 9. I go on the flip side. I actually cracked this one, resubmitted it to BGS, and it ended up true gemming 9.5 all the way around, right? So
nice.
It all depends on kind of like what your strategy is and how much, I guess, gamble you have within you. But like with the right moves, with the right subgrades, I think it's not a bad decision if you go that route.
Yeah. To get it clear, then you would go from a BGS 9.5 to a PSA crossover if you think it could get that PSA 10, because it would increase in value. Like the PSA 10 is far more valuable than the BGS 9.5.
Absolutely. And sometimes it retracts as much as like 50%, right? In certain markets, which is insane if you think about it. It's the same card, yet we're relying on a subjective, grading system, right? And that's why and this is why I always said, we got to listen to kind of like the okay, if this is a true market, and we want to better the market, how can we, get better? And I think part of that is the subjective grading. Like you said, you brought it up. How can like a card like that LeBron Exquisite, be able to do that? And what's the value associated with that, right? Who gets paid at the end of the day? I'm sure that PSA upcharge, I think I seen there's like a new PSA price list, and they said something like their most expensive is like, service is like $16,000 now, like a card, like, which is like insane, right? And it all depends on the value, right? So that's why it's like, I think there's a place for AI grading. I think it's needed, and I would like that. And from there, if we cross over with AI grading where there's no subjectivity, then I like it. But I've stopped crossing over personally. I'm more of a now, I'll crack and resubmit it, because I'm not happy with the grade. And I just think that these companies just look at BGS or PSA will just look at it and just laugh. It's just like, we just made $70 or $150.
Right.
We don't have to grade this. And just print out a sticker, just said, this doesn't qualify, right? So I think it's a bad move in today's market for sure.
Yeah. And just to be clear for some of the listeners that, don't really understand the terminology. So crossover is when you take a slab like BGS 9.5 and you can submit the entire slab to PSA and ask them to grade the card as is in the slab, and you can make it a minimum grade, like, I want a PSA 10. If it's not a PSA 10, don't crack it out of that slab. So they'll look at it, and then if they don't get the PSA 10, they'll send it back to you. So that's crossover. And then when Hyung talks about opening a case, taking the card out, and that's called resubmission. So just to be clear for everybody.
Good point.
Yeah.
And like the other way is to go from a PSA 9, which is mint condition, to hopefully getting a BGS 9.5 which is gem mint.
Right.
That's probably, I think we will all agree, it's more likely to happen than the other way around from a BGS 9.5 to PSA 10.
100%. And I'll give you an example of that, for instance. Like, let's just say I'll take a Luka Optic Auto, his rookie Optic on-card auto. A BGS would sell for around, a 9.5 would sell for around $5,700. The PSA 9 would sell for, $3,500. So it's like, for me, you look at it from an investment standpoint, it's like you look at the card and you're like, you know what, the auto looks great. It's in a PSA 9 slab, right? They're not even grading the auto. The card is well centered. You think it will subgrade well. To me, that's a perfect candidate of cracking and resubmitting to a BGS, because for me, that's going to increase the value of the card by $1,500 potentially. Plus, you have the auto graded, which is a plus, which PSA or the original submitter of that PSA 9, didn't submit the auto to be graded, right? So there's a lot of variables that come into play, but that's a perfect example of how, that move could potentially maybe net you out, $1,000 right there, right?
Right. Yeah. So bottom line, crossover, you would only consider crossover if you think you get more value from the grade that you hope to get from that crossover.
I mean, yeah, for the most part, some people just prefer, PSA slabs or BGS, right? Sure. And it's personal preference at that. Some people say that. Some people say, I hate BGS slabs, and it's a 10 and a 9.5. They want that PSA 10 slab, right? And vice versa, right? Some people, don't like that PSA 9 slab too as well. So
right. I never understood how these companies grade a crossover candidate. Like, how are you supposed to grade a card that's in a case? That never really made sense to me. So like, I get I think that you can definitively kind of look at corners, edges, and centering. Obviously, those are things you can kind of visually see, but I don't get how you could grade surface. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So like, when I think about, I personally would never recommend attempting a PSA 9 to a BGS 9.5 crossover, because PSA 9 doesn't have subgrades. So like, if I don't know how it works, but if I was a grader, I would look at the card, and because I can't see the surface or definitively say this is a great surface, I would probably automatically mark the surface as an 8.5 or a 9 or something, and then literally go from there and go 9.5 corners look great, this looks great, this looks great, and then whatever, right? Like, I think a good candidate possibly for me, in my theory, would be a BGS True Gem Plus, but the plus is the surface. So if you're sending that to PSA, the PSA can look at, okay, BGS is pretty good at grading. They know what they're doing, and they give this a 10 surface. So I can assume that's a 10, and let's work on the visuals of the other grades, right? And then they can work from there. I think that would probably be, for me, the most favorable candidate to cross over. But other than that, I just don't understand how you could grade surface without cracking that card out.
Yeah, no, that's very valid, John. And I think that's exactly, you hit it on the nail, where, the subgrades matter and where they matter. And I find like something with a higher surface, or like centering, for instance, I think BGS is a lot more strict with centering than a PSA, for instance.
Right.
So if you look at the subgrade and, it's a 9 centering, like I have some 9, or I have an 8.5 centering on that Herbert Silver that BGS crazy. Graded.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I don't see that. Like, to me, it's mind blowing. Like, I'm like, this could potentially be a PSA 10. So for me, I have 9.5 subgrades on all the corners, the edges, the surface, and then I got an 8.5 for the centering from BGS, and it ended up BGS 9, but it looks perfectly centered. So for me, like, a real thing would be, okay, I'll use that to my advantage and see, like, you know what, I would take my chances with PSA here, because if PSA deems this centering to be good, that could potentially be a PSA 10, right? So I think the subgrades do help, and just understanding, and this is all with a grain of salt, because PSA, this is like old school, this is the way PSA graded before, right? Because they were a lot less harsh on centering, so that was known in the hobby. Who knows, like, things change. Who knows if they're gonna use AI now or whatever it is, right? So take it with a grain of salt, but
for sure,
there are definitely advantages and disadvantages too. There's sometimes it's a waste of money at the end of the day, right? It's a waste of time and money.
And people should take caution on that PSA announcement where they showed, everyone probably saw it, where they showed that LeBron turned into a 10-10. Because you have to also understand, like, that's one of the biggest cards in the hobby. And for them to make that announcement, that's huge marketing for them. That's huge marketing for their crossover department. And you could imagine, like, now you could have a whole bunch of people sending in $100,000 cards for a potential crossover. That's probably like a $10,000 grading fee, right? So like, this is
for sure.
You take that announcement with a grain of salt. It's not just, literally when I think about it, they can be like, okay, you know what, this might not be a 10, but this is a huge marketing opportunity. And like, they could have made any kind of decision like that, and then we can get huge business from this. Let's do it. Because from most of the crossovers I've seen on YouTube and some of the channels I watch, like, it's tough, man. It's tough. Like, buyer, a collector beware. It's tough to try and cross over. Like a lot of people get burned big time spending a couple $100 for express service on a crossover of 3 or 4 cards, and literally none of them come back. And
I think the most famous card for crossing over is that 93 Derek Jeter, that SP, the full, like everybody tried getting that BGS 9.5 or BGS 9 with better subgrades. They want to cross like a BGS 9 with 2 9.5 subgrades. They try crossing over to a PSA 9 because a PSA 9 goes for way more, you know, than, or sorry, a BGS 9.5 goes way more than, you know, a PSA 9 and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's nuts. Like before it was crazy. It was like people were submitting like crossovers, trying to cross everything over. I don't think much people are doing it now though. It makes zero sense right now.
Yeah,
I think.
And I mean, I think enough people got burned enough to be like, you know what, I'm not doing
to realize
this
I'm not doing that. Yeah. I'd rather go to the casino, you know, put my luck on number 17.
I mean, it's fishy to begin with, right? Like if you sent something over crossover, there's that human subjectivity that we talk about, which is a problem for grading.
Right.
And then when you get a person looking at a slab, which is already graded, which is already graded, subjective, you know, with a subjective grading, and then there's their own bias put into it,
Right.
And you know, they get to essentially decide if it does cross over or not. Like there's so many human elements, which could also be human error factored in. So it doesn't make sense to me to use that service. And like you said, Chiang, you're better off by cracking it and then resubmitting it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
Right.
best.
Well,
100%.
speaking of subjectivity, did you guys see the news of the Kobe card? I don't know how legit it is, but it was pretty big news on a bunch of the IGs. A guy had submitted his Kobe Topps 96 rookie raw, and he got a PSA 8. He didn't agree with it, so he cracked it out, sent it again. He got a PSA 5.
What?
It was so he was like, what the heck? So he cracked it out again, sent it to BGS, and he got a True Gem BGS 9.5.
See, that to me, that is the most mind-blowing thing. That like, just let's not talk about this, or should we talk about this? Because this matters, like 100%. This matters, and you know, this is where, in order for us to make the hobby better, we need to push forward with these issues. I don't think that should ever happen based on, you know, current values, you know, and stuff like that. It's like, that's why you know, an AI system where it's a standard grading system that, you know, multiple companies, you know, follow, and it's all across the board pretty much. It's not meant for human error, right? Like if you really think about it, how many thousands of dollars just because, you know, a grader said it was, you know, 0.5 away from, you know, a True Gem, or it was 0.5 away from a PSA 10. Like, it's just ridiculous how we rely so much on that to dictate the value of a certain product, right? So
just touching upon that issue of AI for a moment, do you think there are any issues with AI grading? Like, is that the perfect answer? Because, you know, it depends on the algorithm, right? And we don't know how that would be set. And I could see a scenario where it is virtually impossible to get gem mints with AI.
Right.
You know, it depends on how high that standard would be.
Right.
And if that was the case, then if you did get a gem mint, like if once you start seeing population reports of AI graded cards, I'm sure there'll be their own category at some point. Like, this card was graded by AI technology versus pre-AI technology, all the cards that we have graded currently, right? Do you think that diminishes the value of the cards we have now versus AI? You know what I mean? Like, there's all these questions.
For sure.
I think maybe that's another show, but I just want to.
I just think that, like, with all this said and done, is I want the PSA 10. You know, it's a supply demand thing. They're not giving it out as much, you know, and grading's not cheap. So I think there's extreme value right now in, you know, PSA 10. So, you know, just give me the PSA 10s and we'll keep chugging along. And you know, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's the tough part, because you're mixing in collectors who want a card they don't really care about grading, and you're mixing in investors. So because it's a mixed world right now, it's tough. Like, let's say PSA does go to this AI, you know, 100% deadly accurate system, and literally every card pumping out is a PSA 8 or a PSA 9, and they don't give out any more 10s. I don't think anybody would use PSA anymore. Like, that's the truth. Like, we're all using PSA because we want that coveted PSA 10. We're all using BGS because we want the pristine 10 or the Gem Mint 9.5s or the black label 10. Like, everybody wants 10s. And I think that's what is hurting, for example, somebody like HGA. They're using so-called like a hybrid AI system. And you can see all these guys getting like 9s. They're getting like 9s.
Yeah, they're super hard.
At best, they're getting 9.5. Yeah. And now,
I think that changes the industry though. At the same time, because now it's like people are saying that HGA is like really hard on grading, right? So it's like that 10 becomes a little more valuable each time because people are like justifying it, right? But yeah, you're right. Like it's tough to kind of justify when HGA's grading lower. Would you rather a BGS 9.5 or a HGA 9? Like at the end of the day, like,
exactly.
I'll tell you exactly what I want, you know?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Is like there's these two camps. There's these people that I want a legit grading of my card, like 100% accuracy. And then there's another crowd that's like, I just want to see 10s, man. Like, I don't care if it's not, 50-50 centering. I just want a 10 on my slab. That's all I care about. So like that's when you're trying to battle the two camps, it's really hard to either find something in the middle or, find like a perfect solution that kind of caters to everybody.
I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole too. Like I could play the scenario where, just say in that example you shared, John, that there's no more PSA 10s or very little because of the algorithm.
Right. And
PSA is like, whoa, no one's submitting anything to us. All of a sudden, you start getting PSA 10s.
Right.
The algorithm shifts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then what? Then
man.
It's like, it's subjective in a different way.
Right.
Because someone at the top is making those decisions too, right?
Yeah. You pull the levers down a little bit to you let the machines do a little, make it a little bit easier.
But I guess time will tell. I mean, like, there's got to be a better answer to the current way things are graded, because your Kobe example is a perfect example of that. Like, that can't happen.
Yeah, that can't happen.
That's just kind of that's ridiculous. So, but I just want to come back once more to the LeBron card before we move on. Yeah, I totally agree with you that you got to take that news with a grain of salt, because if you looked at the BGA subgrades, the corners were a BGS 9 subgrade.
Right.
So I can imagine people thinking, oh, I have a 9 and everything else is a 9.5 or better. So maybe if the LeBron card got a PSA 10, I could send it in. I mean, that might be, I think that's fool's gold, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Be careful out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, grading is going to be a huge part of this industry, no doubt. So that's why it's important to talk about, and something we can definitely revisit in the future as the technology progresses. And I'm sure it will. All right, with that, we can move on to our next segment, which is a new one. We're calling it Hobby Shoutout. So as more and more people get into the hobby, there'll be a lot of voices and opinions shared across Hobbyland. But we wanted to shout out the ones we ourselves go to that we think bring value to the hobby community. Whether it's through good insight into what's going on in the sport card industry, which we try to do on this pod, or maybe they just bring straight up entertainment value into the hobby, which is a good way of getting people into the hobby, right? It's just entertaining for them as well. So I thought we would just dedicate this section to shouting out those influencers or those channels. Even it doesn't have to be a person. Others can go check out themselves too. Other collectors can go check out themselves as well. So does anyone have one off the top of their head?
For me, when we started collecting or getting back into collecting, the first thing a bunch of us kind of did was get on Instagram. Like this was before everybody was on Instagram. It was a really cool way to kind of like trade, show your collection. So I had a few guys that kind of, were in that boat, and then kind of evolved as the industry grew. They kind of became like the influencer, right? So there's a guy specifically. He doesn't even know that we probably do podcasts here, because I talked to him kind of like just as a regular just conversation about cards. But he has a YouTube channel and Instagram. His YouTube channel, I think, is up to about 7,000 subscribers now. So he's giving tremendous value. And it's funny because we talked about crossover grading, and I talked to him about similar things with Tatis Sapphire and stuff like that. And he used my example in one of his videos. But his name is Scotty Baldwin, Scotty B Cards on YouTube. I mentioned him to you guys a bunch of times because I just see the value he's given. He's always constantly educating, talks about these issues like, for instance, crossover grading or which rookie cards to invest in. The difference is, kind of similar discussions that we do, but he kind of goes in depth with video. So, and he's a great guy. Most importantly, you talk to a bunch of guys in the hobby, and for me, who I deal with or who my networks are is important. The integrity of people, right? At the end of the day, you don't want to deal with schmucks that freaking waste your time, right, and have no integrity, right? Right. Like having people like that in the hobby, I think is crucial, and I fully support what he's doing, and tell people every time if you're new to this hobby, he's a great influencer to kind of follow. It's Scotty B Cards, Scotty Baldwin on Instagram.
Yeah, I know you did mention him a few times to us, and I've checked out a few of his videos. Definitely seems like a genuine guy, which is what I like about him and his videos, for sure.
Yeah. And he's a big baseball guy, so for listeners out there, if you want to learn about the nuances of all the different baseball cards, he's a great guy to use for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
John, you got one? Yeah,
I got a couple. I mean, I think it's no surprise. I've mentioned Jeff Wilson on this show a lot of times, but I still, some people may not like him too much. Maybe he's a little bit too commercial and a little bit too business, but I think he brings like excellent value, production, everything is, I really like him. It's a sports card investor. That's his handle on either YouTube or IG.
Yeah.
And for some of the people who are newer to the hobby, if you look at, I think he's been on YouTube for about 2 years now. If you go back and look at some of his old, like earliest videos, like they still provide tremendous value. He talks about all of sort of it's pretty much cards 101. Like he goes through every sort of big topic. So if you have the time, if you want to take a look at some of his older stuff, because his newer stuff, he's like Dallas Card Show, card breaks, box battles, like things that newer people in the hobby might not understand or get, or may feel like it's relevant or really useful to them. So his earlier videos are really helpful. And if you don't want to look at his channel, like there's a guy named The Great Curator. He's actually really new to YouTube. I think he's got about 2,000 subs, but he's very similar to, for anyone who's new out there to the hobby, he goes over a lot of these things, especially like values between PSA, BGS, SGC, how to handle yourself at a card show, like etiquettes. Like he talks about all of those things for anybody that's fairly new to it. So not so much maybe something that's interesting to like the grizzled veterans in the hobby, but for some of the new people, like that guy, The Great Curator, he brings a lot. I feel he brings a lot of value. I've been enjoying his channel.
Nice.
Cool. I definitely agree with you about Jeff Wilson. I know some people think he's a little too slick, but I mean, just because he has high production values, you got to look at the content for what it is. Definitely brings value for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, mine is Sasha T. I know a lot of people already know him, but if you don't, and you're new to the hobby and you don't, it just gives you a nice glimpse of someone that's into really high-end cards. Like, he's definitely a high roller, and I don't know, I find him more entertaining maybe than educational, like some of your guys' picks.
Right.
But you get to see behind the scenes of him going to the card show and negotiating. I love that stuff, like the back and forth.
Yeah.
Right. And like when you're talking about like tens of thousands of dollars of one card, and like even trading, like we talked about trading in a previous episode, and like just like how they try to get to the trade card value of multiple cards. That's kind of interesting to see as well. And he seems like to be a down to earth kind of guy as well. But yeah, it's definitely like when you get a glimpse into that kind of world, like where you can, if you're an investor type, who you can aspire to, where you can just build up like your collection, and then you kind of trade, and then you get to a point where you're dealing with big cards all of a sudden.
Right.
Like you kind of see that journey actually if you go back to some of his older videos as well. And now he's to a point where it's like, I think the latest one I saw at the National, him and another guy from Card Talk podcast, like they were in together on a Lewis Hamilton
Oh, nice.
card. I can't remember what refractor it was, but I think it was valued at $50K.
Wow.
Wow.
And the negotiating back and forth was it's crazy. And then it just reminded me of that because recently I think they just traded that card again for like a bunch of basketball cards, like LaMelo Kaboom, other Kaboom cards, like about 8 or 9 of those type of cards. So that's a play. Like you just seeing all these different plays. It's kind of entertaining to see what's possible out there. And you know, maybe you have certain cards that you want to trade or buy or sell, not to kind of that degree where it's that high end, but it's the same kind of principle, right? And like you have certain cards and
see how easy
you look for the cards you like.
See how easy it is for him to make deals with people, because he's kind of marketed himself as that, right? So it's like when people do deals, I guarantee you people are willing to do more deals with him than, you know, a complete stranger, for instance, right? So he's put that kind of on himself and kind of marketed himself in that way, and it makes liquidity so much easier. I'm telling you, he's making these trades, and it's great because we're seeing kind of like I follow him too, and you get to see kind of like the everyday hustle of how it's done, instead of an educational constant like this is how you. It's like we're on the floor right now, you know, working.
Yeah.
So
I think like half of his video footage is him in his car getting ready to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But you're right, for sure.
Yeah. I wanted to shout out one more. And I know this IG account has become pretty polarizing over the last couple of weeks. But I think, you know, take it for what you will. I think Card Porn is a great follow too. And I know that people will harp on it because he's, you know, some people will say that, oh, you know, he only points out the negative. But regardless, he points out a lot of flaws in the hobby and a lot of issues and things like the, you know, the crossovers and the subjectivity of grading. Like he'll point out a lot of things and you know, scammers or whatnot. And, you know, a lot of it is not justified, yes. But regardless, you know, you take the news however you want to take it. But I just him bringing awareness to the hobby, whether it's positive or negative news, I think it's pretty valuable. So I feel like Card Porn is a pretty good follow.
Fair point.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely fair. All right. Yeah, we just wanted to give some hobby love to the people we follow, and hopefully people find us, you know, a good follow as well. And I think it's all about giving value at the end of the day, right? So
yeah.
So that's what we need more of in the hobby. Maybe we'll return to this segment. You know, there's always people coming into the hobby looking to fill. Like there's, you know, we always say this. It's growing a lot, but we feel like it's still early. Like people can get in and do their thing in the hobby. You know, it's not too late.
Sure.
And it changes, right? So it's like new businesses, you know, end up, you know, popping up, new, you know, career moves. Like for instance, I know a few people that, you know, they lost their jobs and, you know, they ended up opening up a card store, for instance, or stuff like that, where it becomes life changing, and then it kind of becomes the, you know, pavement to the next kind of like chapter of how this industry / hobby is going, right? So yeah, I think it's only positive, and the way we push forward in a market is we have discussions about these things, right? Is bringing these issues like crossovers, is it worth it? Like subjectivity and grading, all these things people need to be aware of, and you know, at the end of the day, everybody's responsible for their own decisions, right? So it's like that's what we have to always remember. It's like don't rely on anybody else but yourself, right? Your strongest asset is your knowledge and it's your money from an investment standpoint. So you're gonna have to, you know, stand behind it. So you do your research. That's why I say buy what you love. You do your research, buy what you love. You'll never have an issue, and you get confirmations from, you know, influencers that can, you know, help educate you further in the markets, right? So it's yeah, I'm happy with you know, the people that constantly you know, evolve through this business, because we see people pop up every day, and influencers. There's going to be another one, you know, in a couple months that we've never heard of, right? And then he's going to bring value or call something out where, you know, maybe potentially the industry gets better, right? So
right.
Yeah, 100%. That's what the hobby needs.
Yeah.
Okay, with that then, we can move on to our last segment. It's a regular segment of the show called Pick One. So for those who are new to the program, Pick One is where each of us choose 2 cards or sets or players, and then we debate which one we'd rather invest in. So we kind of shared what we would be talking about prior to the show. So I'll go first because mine's the more regular pick. People will understand what I mean by that in a sec. But my pick one is between two players, Derek Carr versus Jimmy Garoppolo. I'll let you know why. Yeah, Jimmy G. I'll let you know why I chose those two because, well, NFL seasons, we're 2 weeks in now, 3 weeks now. And if you look at the record, the Niners are 2-0, Jimmy G's team, and the Las Vegas Raiders are 2-0, Derek Carr's team. And if you look at their history, it's eerily similar. I think they both came into the league in 2014. They're both 29, 30 years old, drafted both in the second round. Of course, Jimmy G was Tom Brady's backup for 4 years or so.
England,
has 2 Super Bowls, though, as the backup.
Right.
I think 2020, was it? Or in 2019? I'll have to double check.
2020, I think.
Brought the Niners to the Super Bowl
lost to
match
Mahomes,
where they were 7 minutes away of winning it, but then Patrick Mahomes did his thing, and Casey Cheese won it that year. So he was close. And then on the flip side with Derek Carr, he's had his ups and downs, but he had a couple of good seasons early on. And then I think the last 3 or 4, it's been about like 500 was going 500 was his best season. Last year, I think 8-8. Right. But, a lot of people are high on Derek Carr this year. Things seem to have improved for the Raiders. I know a lot of people don't like Vegas Dave. You guys know Vegas Dave.
Oh, yeah.
But if you saw his latest video, he's all about Derek Carr. He's like,
he's pumping his stock big time.
He's pumping it for sure. So I wanted to put Derek Carr up too to see, if you believe more in Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo from a hobby sense.
This was tough, and I figured you picked these two as well because I believe Jimmy G is very underpriced compared to like Derek Carr, right? Just from, and like you said, it's pretty even, Steven. And one, I don't mind Vegas Dave. He speaks his truth, and just throwing that out there, he speaks his truth. He ruffles a lot of feathers, but hey, to each their own. But I don't. This one's a tough one. They're both 2014. For me, Derek Carr is obviously the favorite in terms of who people are after. Jimmy G is kind of a guy that his prices are low, so I think there's no loss there. But for me, I'm going with volatility again, Derek Carr, because people are on the bandwagon, and I think from an investment standpoint, a lot more people are on Derek Carr over Jimmy. So I'll pick Derek Carr with Vegas Dave as well.
Nice.
Oh man, I can't believe I'm gonna side with Vegas Dave here, but I am going Derek Carr, and it's 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is the volatility, like Hyung mentioned. He's off to a hot start, and I think everything that Vegas Dave has been saying, new market, lots of collectability, everybody wanted to see it, and they didn't really get it last year, but he's off to that start this year, so we could see a bit of a spike. But number 2 is on the flip side, Jimmy G. I just think his leash is really short with Trey Lance right behind him.
Right.
And I don't trust that situation. And when you look at the quarterbacks in the league and the teams, man, it seems like I've never, I'm more of a casual football fan now, but back in my younger days, I was huge into football. And I don't remember a time where almost every team in the league had a young buck a quarterback of the future. There are so many QBs, and let's say Jimmy falls and Trey Lance takes over. I don't even know where Jimmy would fall or where he would fit in another team, in a trade scenario. Everybody seemingly has their quarterback of the future. So because of that reason, I just think Jimmy, no matter how low his stock is, I just think there's way too much risk here, picking his card up. So, yeah.
Okay. I guess this is an easy one because it's going to be a Vegas Dave sweep with Derek Carr. With Derek Carr as the winner.
Yeah, you guys pretty much highlighted all the points. One thing I would add to it is the injury history. I know Derek Carr and Jimmy G both have injury history, but
Right.
I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more riskier in
Right,
that.
yeah.
Is more risky
Big
in
time.
that regard.
Yeah. Good point.
And you look at his stats too, like it fluctuates. Like he has sub 200-yard games,
Right.
and then he has like 350. Like it just depends on the game itself. So while with Derek Carr, you just expect him to launch footballs, get his 400 yards,
Yeah.
get his 300 yards, right? So that's always good for the card value. You want to see high yards and a lot of touchdowns in the air. So yeah, and the one thing that you kind of touched upon too that really tempts me to pick Jimmy G though is definitely the value is there for Jimmy.
Right,
Like
yeah.
you could really make a killing if everything breaks right.
Right, exactly.
Whereas card, a lot of it's already baked in a little bit right now.
Right.
I figured that's why you threw that out there, because it's like seriously, because the easy answer is Derek Carr, but like from an investment standpoint, you're right. It's like you might have better opportunity, on the other side. So it's very valid. I was actually going back and forth just because of that, right? But then, if Vegas Dave's on Carr, then you know that. Prices are going up and down like crazy.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, either Hyung or John, your pick one picks are a little bit different.
Yeah,
So-
you know what? This is always like, speaks dear to me, because I personally love, ripping, as you guys know. I like ripping both Topps product and Panini products, but with this whole Fanatics deal and stuff like that, where the future is going, I want to know Topps versus Panini straight up. Do you guys like what Panini's doing, or do you like the avenue Topps is going in terms of brand value, investment wise? Because obviously Topps has currently the MLB licensing, some I guess soccer licensing. They obviously have Bowman, which is a part of baseball as well, and then Panini mostly has that basketball and football side, right? So it's it does exist, but they're unlicensed. Panini's unlicensed, obviously, in MLB, and vice versa. If there's any brands that are unlicensed other than Panini on the football and basketball side, they're unlicensed. So I like breaking both products, but I have a personal favorite because obviously, I'm a lot more successful with one brand over the other. But I would like to know what you guys what you guys feel about this one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is a good one. That was my one gripe with our Topps Chrome box opening, is I love Panini's case hits. The color blasted downtowns, and I just wish Topps Chrome just changed it up this year and start. Yeah, their case hits are, like, in my opinion, are pretty weak. Obviously, you can get, like a Derek Jeter auto game use patch, like if you're really really lucky. But man, I wish their case hits were a lot better. But with that being said, for me it's pretty easy because it's more due to sentiment. It's got to be Topps for me. Like, we're all old heads. We grew up with Topps. And most especially, like, my fondest memory and my most biggest chase ever was going after Kobe and his iconic Topps Chrome set, right? So if Topps Chrome basketball ever came back like that, I would be going for that 100%. So for me, just the sentiment and the history of Topps and Topps Chrome, I'm going with Topps on this one.
Yeah, you know what? It was easy for me because for the exact same reason, nostalgia, like Topps is it, right? So I try to take that out of the equation and see what I would come up with. And this is hard, right? Like, I feel like Panini, like you mentioned, John, like the case hits, even the high-end sets, I feel like Panini just does a way better job than Topps.
I agree.
Like, what's Topps Tribute, Topps Triple Threats? Like, their high-end stuff's okay.
Right.
It's
very
Topps
niche.
Museum.
It's very
and,
niche.
like,
Yeah.
Where,
It's true.
Immaculate for Panini or National Treasures, like that's iconic sets already for a lot of collectors. So I like that about Panini. But that being said, I think I don't know, maybe it's because I'm more of a baseball guy too, and I like going after players. Like the Bowman set's iconic for me. You know, like every year, that's where you get your draft picks. Like it's all really focused on the players. It's like Topps said, we're not going to focus on the product per se, but we're just going to focus on like who we can sign or who we can get to get autos for, you know, and just kind of play it that way. And now, you know, like in recent news, you'll see Topps doing multiple partnerships, you know, whether it's their NFT product or the Topps. I know like there's, you know, Topps Project 2020 is like, you know, some people love it, some people hate it, but I like that they're trying new things. And I feel like, well, with the Fanatics deal just on the horizon, like, you know, I think that's their only play now, to have these partnerships and see which hits, you know, and I think I like that as a company. It's kind of a little bit more forward thinking that way. Whereas, you know, Panini, I'm sure has partnerships as well, but it's more visible with Topps. So I guess you take the bias out, you take the nostalgia out. I'm still going with Topps.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I feel a sweep coming.
You know, wait, before I say it though, like that, I think Clark, you hit it on the nail. Like for me, it's like the upper end stuff is what's very intriguing with Panini. Even like their, you know, stuff like the retail hits, like the tiger stripes, the elephant prints, the zebras. I really like those big chase cards. I think they do a really good job like dressing it up, and honestly, that's my downfall on Topps, to be honest. I'm disappointed in mostly all their products, you know, I would say 2019. But I love Bowman. I think they do a fantastic job with Bowman.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing that I would say that wins Topps over Panini is the fact that they do a great job with, you know, the first release of the year, which is, you know, Bowman, and their first prospects and the colors. To me, the colors on first chromes are kind of like the baseball kind of grails. Like that's what people are after. We're going super early, so I think that's the only reason I would pick Topps over Panini. But in terms of success, like I've had way more success with Topps. Obviously, I don't hit anything with Panini, which sucks. But I still enjoy Panini like very, very much. I still like what they produce. I love Select. I think they have such a great line. Even Prism, I love Prism, Select, Optic. They're all strong sets in my opinion, and they have the higher end stuff like the case hits that Topps Chrome lacks. So it was tough. It was tough for me. If it wasn't for Bowman, 100% I would be Panini. Even though I don't hit with Panini, but Bowman saves it. I'm really enjoying 2021. It's actually decently affordable because the hype kind of died down a bit. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Topps for the complete sweep. Sweet. Unfortunately, yeah.
Knew it.
Nice.
All right, so I don't think we give too much love to wax investors, and by wax I mean investing in unopened boxes. So I'm gonna go with specific sets, but 2021 basketball Select as a wax investment versus 2021 Optic basketball as a wax investment. And we all know over the last 6 to 12 months, Select as a brand has overtaken Optic in terms of value and brand and yada yada yada. But this year's Select, both in football and basketball, has taken they're taking huge criticism because of the print run, right? I think Optic, they may have printed a lot more base and introduced a couple of new parallels, but relatively, the same. But Select, they printed way more, their Concourse Premier courtside, and then the parallels, I think, and I don't know if these numbers are true, but a sports card investor, Jeff Wilson's team mentioned it. Last year's product had, roughly give or take 50 different parallels amongst, and obviously also people should know that Select moved into retail this year for the first time and not just hobby release.
Yeah.
But they went from 50 parallels to over 200 parallels.
Wow.
So it I think everybody's feeling like Select is, although their number 2 is pretty watered down this year. I mean, do it right now. Go on eBay, type in LaMelo Ball courtside, and just look at the number of listings. Like, it's pages upon pages upon pages. Like, we're talking an SSP card, right? I don't even know if it even qualifies as SP anymore.
Yeah.
So that I wanted to throw that out there, even maybe even just as a brand in general going forward. If you're going to invest, are you in any of this new product? Are you still going Select, or are you going Optic?
One, I would never invest in wax because I couldn't wait that.
Me neither.
I would just rip it. I don't know how you wax holders just have that patience. I think you guys are kind of crazy in a different way. So never trust the man that carries wax in a safe, right?
That's like buying Ninja Turtles as an 8-year-old and never opening it. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I respect them because they're the ones who are actually making money, right? Because
for sure.
But this one I personally hate it that Select went retail. To be honest, I think it kind of ruined the brand because we are always big on Select, pre 2021 on the basketball. We love our court sides. We love our courtside silvers. I personally hate that Panini has so many parallels on an SSP like a courtside or whatever SP on a courtside. I don't think you need that many parallels, but I think that was inevitable, to be honest, with the market being the way it is. It just becomes more market share essentially, in terms of a lot more people are in the hobby or in the market now. There's a lot more money floating around, so they're trying to keep the supply and demand relative to, because if you do have those, let's just say 50 parallels amongst let's just say there was like 5 million people in the industry 2 years ago, and now there's like 10 million, right? So it's like it all has to be relative in terms of I think how many people are in the market. So it's unfortunate that that's the way Select went, and because for me it was always easy, because I do like Select, but I don't know, like something about Optic is very intriguing to me because that rated rookie logo, and in terms of it's always going to be your OG, your classic, kind of like your second tier to Prism, in my opinion, or that option. Optic is ridiculously bad at, I guess, what is it, quality control, centering issues and surface. It's so hard to gem. But I think if you're talking about like hobby boxes, I think I'm gonna go Optic, to be honest, because I think it's still number 2 right now, and I think it'll still be number 2 in a lot of people's hearts. I think Print Run is respectable still. If you look at even Mahomes' Optic versus other print runs of Mahomes, Optic is actually a lot, like for instance like a Luka. Today I seen a Luka Prism or a Luka Select versus a Optic Mahomes. You see the print runs on Optic Mahomes and PSA 10s a lot more scarce than the other brands. So I think long term, Select is still figuring what it wants to do, in my opinion. I think I'm going to pick Optic in this case, because you have your on-card autos that are actually more sought after than Select autos, right? So long term, I'm going Optic from a wax investment standpoint. But truthfully, everybody knows I'm ripping both boxes if I do get them.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I am going Select. Even though all those caveats you mentioned, like the higher print runs this year, at the end of the day, I still think it's about brand. Like Optic versus Select. And I think people will still prefer Panini Select. And maybe they'll dig deeper. Maybe the serious investor collectors will know the print runs are higher, so that might impact what they invest in. But I think if you look at the branding of both sets, in my opinion, Select's a little bit more desirable. So I think there's going to be more demand for that product despite the higher print runs. And I think that's going to win out at the end of the day, because Optic could have lower print runs and it'll be harder to hit some of their hits, but if you don't have enough people wanting that product, then it doesn't matter, right? So, I obviously hate the fact that there are 200 parallels versus 50,
Right.
But honestly, 50 parallels is a lot to me anyways. So what's another 150? Like, I lost track of how many parallels. Like, when I first got into the hobby, and we got past like the true colors, and I'm like, what are these waves? And what are these like shimmers?
Yeah, right.
And then you just kind of get used to it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like all these different parallels, and then even some of those like crazy parallels, like a lot of them have value still, right? Like they're numbered and whatnot. So who knows? Out of those 200 new parallels, maybe one of the newer ones will be the one that will be desirable to collect for whatever reason.
Well, there's how many animals exist in the world?
I
Well,
was gonna say.
yeah, you have a lot of parallels there.
maybe a mongoose skin parallel card
Yeah,
will be the one that's highly desired in the future. So you never know. Like that's the market is the market at the end of the day.
Right.
Like people can say like, I want that, the Chihuahua skin. I don't know. I've been baffled more than several times in the hobby. Well, we talked about a hobby logic, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
things that just don't make sense, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that's how I see the parallels in general. Even with the higher number, you can still have value, even though just because the market wants it for whatever reason.
Right.
And brand plays a big part of my decision. I still think Select's far more premium than Optic.
Yeah. And I think it was meant to be more premium, but yeah, great point. You know what? I will give credit to Select. It looks like a fun rip because when you look at the football product, the odds of you, there's just so many different base rookies and then parallels and inserts. The odds of you ripping, if you rip football, the odds of you ripping Herbert or Joe Burrow is like super high, and then the odds of you ripping like LaMelo or Tyrese, Halliburton, like super high as well. So like if for yourself for like a fun rip or for your kids, like 100%, I think Select is a great option. I think this is, with that being said though, I'm gonna go Optic. And this is probably the old guy in me, and a lot of the newer people in the hobby or the younger collectors, they're gonna probably they'll rip on us old heads. But I've always liked Optic as a look. I love the Rated Rookie. It brings back those old memories, and I love that clean sort of like white border. On the flip side, I know the younger kids these days they look at that and they're just like, that is the most dumb, boring looking card I have ever seen. And they can't believe someone like us would say Optic looks better. And
it's nostalgia.
It makes sense. Exactly. We're only choosing Optic because it's nostalgic. There's no other real reason, but it does look cleaner. And I think I'm just so upset with the way Panini handled their Select product. Like, Hyung and I, we love Select. And for them to come out this way and just like literally make everything not, just the print run is just too crazy, and nothing seems super limited, and it's just really disappointing. And I think for that reason, almost that reason alone, I'd rather invest in Optic and see how Optic does as a brand moving forward. And I'm kind of with you on that, Clark. Like I think overall, I'm deep inside, if I remove the nostalgia, I feel like Select will still be bigger than Optic, but I do want to believe that Optic has a chance to rebound.
Fair. I like Optic too. I love the luck, but maybe it is because we're old heads, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
Us geezers.
All right. Nice. Okay, that's actually a wrap to another fun episode. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, we would really appreciate a 5-star review, or if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast so that you'll get notified every time we post our new weekly episodes, which is every Tuesday. So looking forward to next week with another new episode. Till then, take care. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John
at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cartguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.